You know that moment when your phone's quiet for the first time in days and your thumb hovers over the screen, ready to check, but you don't? You stop yourself. You feel it, that stretch of silence that used to scare you half to death, but this time it doesn't. It feels different, still, heavy, real. And in that instant, something inside of you whispers, wait, don't move. Just stay here. That right there is the beginning of your power. For so long, you've been trained to chase closure, to chase understanding, to chase love that keeps running away from you. You've been running on autopilot, explaining, proving, overgiving, like if you could just say the right thing, they'd finally see you. But listen to me, chasing never made you seen. It only made you smaller. You learned somewhere along the way that love means effort, that if you stop reaching out, it'll all fall apart. And maybe that belief kept you alive once, but it's not keeping you whole now. Because what you're really craving isn't them, it's peace. And peace doesn't come from pursuit. Peace comes from pause. I want you to sit with that. When you finally stop chasing someone, the silence you hear isn't rejection. It's your life coming back to you. It's the sound of your nervous system finally exhaling. It's the moment you stop performing and start existing. And I know what your mind's screaming, but if I stop, they'll forget me. No, if you stop, you'll finally remember yourself. See, the truth is, every text you didn't send, every explanation you didn't give, every urge you resisted, that wasn't weakness. That was training. That was your soul, learning how to breathe without permission. Right now, in this very silence, you are stronger than you've ever been, even if it doesn't feel like it. You're not losing them. You're gaining you. And that, my friend, is the moment the chase ends and your healing begins. Let's tell the truth. Chasing is an addiction, not to the person, not even to the love. You're addicted to the feeling of pursuit, to the tiny hits of maybe that trick your brain into thinking connection is close enough to grab. That's dopamine. That's the same chemical your brain releases when you refresh your feed and see a notification. And in relationships, it's the same rush you feel when they text back after days of silence. Your body lights up and suddenly you're high on hope again. But here's the catch. Dopamine doesn't care about happiness. It only cares about anticipation. It keeps you chasing the next moment, never peace. It keeps you explaining yourself to people who stopped listening long ago. It keeps you believing that if you just hang on a little longer, you'll finally earn what should have been mutual all along. Sound familiar? You tell yourself, I just want closure. But that's not true, is it? What you really want is relief. You want the anxiety to stop. You want to know that you mattered. And instead of sitting with that ache, you run right back into the pattern that caused it. Because doing anything, feels better than facing the silence that scares you. That's not love. That's withdrawal. And I get it. You've been taught your whole life that love means proving. You chase because it feels safer than stillness. You explain because you're terrified of being misunderstood. You reach out because waiting feels like dying. But what if the silence isn't the enemy? What if it's detox? Think about that. The reason it hurts so much when you stop chasing isn't because you lost them. It's because you're losing the illusion of control. You're coming down from the high of trying to earn what should flow freely. Your body's not broken, it's recalibrating. You're not weak for wanting to reach out, you're rewiring. And every second you resist the urge to chase, you're teaching your nervous system a brand new language, safety without chaos. Here's the real question I want you to ask yourself. If chasing love feels like survival, who taught you that peace had to be earned? Because until you answer that, you'll keep running after ghosts. And listen, you can't catch a ghost. You can only stop running long enough to realize you were never being chased back. This is the part of healing. No one glamorizes the withdrawal, the shaking, the doubt. But it's also the part where everything starts to change. Because when you stop chasing, you make space for truth to catch up. And that truth is simple. You don't need to be chosen to be valuable. You just need to stop mistaking adrenaline for love. Here's what most people never understand. Stillness isn't silence, it's strength. Stillness isn't doing nothing. It's doing the hardest thing in the world, not reacting. You know what I mean? That moment when you feel the urge to text, to explain, to fix, to make sure they're okay so you can feel okay. That urge feels like fire under your skin. It's almost unbearable. But right there, that's where the shift begins. When you choose stillness over reaction, you're not ignoring them, you're honoring yourself. Your nervous system's screaming, do something. That's when you use the 5-second rule. Count it out with me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And instead of reacting, you breathe. You sit in that ache. You feel it, all the confusion, the longing, the pull, and you don't move. Because every time you don't react, you teach your body that the world doesn't end when you stop performing. And I know that's hard to believe at first. You've built your identity around being the fixer, the caretaker, the one who always keeps the peace. You confuse effort with value. You think if you're not reaching out, you're disappearing. But that's the lie that keeps you small. Stillness is the first boundary that says, I'm no longer chasing connection at the expense of myself. It's not about punishing anyone. It's about protecting your peace. It's about creating a sacred pause where your worth is not up for negotiation. When you go still, something powerful happens. The energy that used to spiral outward, the explanations, the texts, the overthinking starts turning inward. You start to hear your own voice again. At first, it's faint, like a whisper. You're okay. You're safe. You don't have to chase love to deserve it. And then it gets louder. That's your intuition waking up the part of you that always knew the truth but was drowned out by noise. Stillness rewires everything. You start realizing that silence doesn't mean abandonment. It means awareness. It's the moment you shift from reaction to reflection. It's the line between self-betrayal and self-respect. And here's what's wild. When you stop reacting, people notice. Not because you're playing games, but because your energy feels different. You're not performing. You're grounded. You're calm. And calm is magnetic. Let me say that again. Calm is magnetic. People chase what they can't control. So when you stop chasing, when you sit in stillness with your peace intact, they start to feel your absence in a way words never could. They'll wonder what changed. They'll sense the boundary. But by then, you won't be waiting for them to understand it because you'll already be living it. Stillness isn't passive. It's the quiet declaration of self-worth. It's the moment you stop asking for reciprocity and start embodying respect. It's the space where your energy becomes untouchable. So next time you feel that urge to reach out, pause, 5 seconds, breathe. Because in that breath, you're not losing connection, you're building control. And that, my friend, is the first silent boundary that makes you unchaseable. You've spent most of your life waiting for someone to tell you that you're enough, that you did the right thing, that you're lovable, that you matter. But hear me when I say this, the person who's supposed to say that is you. Self-validation isn't arrogance. It's not ego. It's emotional adulthood. It's the moment you stop renting your self-worth from people who can't afford it. You see, every time you look for validation outside of yourself in their text, their tone, their attention, you hand over your emotional steering wheel. And then you wonder why you keep crashing into disappointment. When you live for validation, silence feels like punishment. But when you validate yourself, silence becomes peace. Let me tell you something. Confidence isn't a feeling. It's a habit. It's a repetition of small, quiet moments where you tell yourself the truth. I did my best. I showed up. I was honest. And that's enough. Every time you say that, you're building the muscle of self-trust. And self-trust is what turns a storm into still water. Here's what happens. When you don't have that muscle, you chase reassurance because you don't believe your own voice. You second guess everything you do because you're terrified of being wrong. You explain yourself because you've mistaken approval for safety. But when you start validating yourself, the energy flips. You stop performing for understanding and start standing in truth. Say it out loud right now. I don't need their response to know my worth. Say it again, slower. I don't need their response to know my worth. That's not just affirmation, that's rewiring. You are teaching your brain to stop looking outward for what has always lived within you. So let me make this plain. The boundary of self-validation means you no longer wait for closure to feel complete. You no longer beg for recognition to feel seen. You no longer need to convince anyone that your heart was pure, your love was real, your effort mattered. You already know it did. This boundary transforms every relationship you have, especially the one with yourself, because when you stop chasing validation, you start attracting alignment. You stop trying to prove your value, and people start feeling it. And those who can't meet it, they drift away, not because you're cold, but because your energy no longer fits their dysfunction. And that's not loss, that's filtering. That's your peace choosing itself. You want to know why avoidant people eventually notice your absence? Because your self-validation takes away their mirror. They can't project their insecurities onto you anymore. You've stopped being their emotional caretaker, and that unsettles them. But for you, that's liberation, because you've stopped chasing acknowledgement and started living acknowledgement. You wake up one day and realize you don't crave their validation anymore. You crave your calm. You crave your focus. You crave your life back. And that's when you know the boundary of self-validation has become your superpower. You've stopped explaining. You've started existing. You've stopped auditioning. You've started owning. You've stopped proving. You've started believing. That's when you become unchaseable, not because you're unavailable, but because you're unshakable. Let's talk about the third silent boundary, emotional detachment. Now, before you roll your eyes, I need you to hear me clearly. Detachment is not indifference. Detachment is clarity. It's not that you stop caring. It's that you stop carrying. You stop carrying the weight of someone else's emotions, reactions, or silence on your back. You stop making their distance mean you're not enough. That's the power of emotional detachment. It's not cold, it's conscious. It's the quiet decision to stop bleeding every time someone else forgets how to hold you. You see, emotional detachment isn't about shutting down. It's about opening your eyes. It's saying, I can see your behavior for what it is, a reflection of your fear, not proof of my inadequacy. It's the difference between absorbing pain and observing it. When you learn to detach, you stop being the actor in their movie. You become the director of your own, and that's where everything changes. Because the avoidant, the distant, the unavailable, they thrive on emotional reaction. They feed off your chase, your confusion, your need to fix things. It keeps them in control. It reassures their ego that they still matter to you, even when they're gone. But when you stop reacting, when your energy goes calm, when you stop sending emotional oxygen to the fire they started, suddenly they can't breathe the same way anymore. They start feeling the silence they once thought they wanted. They start hearing echoes where your validation used to be. Because calm energy doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop negotiating your peace. And that silence, that still grounded presence is what they can't control. That's what rattles them. Because for the first time, you're not predictable. You're not the fixer, the rescuer, the one who chases clarity. You've become the mirror. They can't manipulate. Emotional detachment is the point where you finally stop reacting to pain and start responding to truth. It's when you stop asking, why are they doing this to me? And start asking, why am I still allowing it? When you reach that point, everything slows down. The noise fades. You start to see your patterns, the overgiving, the overthinking, the endless explaining, and you just stop. Not out of anger, but out of wisdom. You realize that protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's sacred. Because peace is what your nervous system has been begging for since the day you learned to equate chaos with love. And here's the paradox. When you finally detach, that's when they feel the connection the most. Your absence becomes louder than any argument you ever had. Your calm becomes the question they can't answer because you've taken away the control they mistook for love, but you don't do it to get a reaction. You do it because you've outgrown the game. That's what emotional detachment really is. Not revenge, not punishment, but transcendence. It's you saying, I can love you and still choose myself. It's you realizing that peace is not something you find in another person. It's what you create when you stop needing them to validate what's already true about you. And once you taste that kind of calm, you'll never chase chaos again. That's the third silent boundary. The boundary of emotional detachment, the one that frees you from the addiction to reaction and teaches you how to live from response. You're no longer chasing, you're choosing. You're no longer explaining, you're observing. You're no longer waiting, you're living. And that right there is the moment you stop revolving around someone else's avoidance and start revolving around your peace. Something powerful happens the moment you start holding these boundaries. It's quiet, subtle, but it changes everything. It's the shift the moment your power starts to come back home. See, for so long, your emotional energy has been leaking out through reaction. Every text you overanalyzed, every silence you tried to decode, every apology you gave just to keep the peace that was energy leaving you. And you didn't even realize it. You thought you were loving. You thought you were patient. You thought you were healing. But really, you were depleting. Every time you explained your worth, you were sending it away. Every time you begged for clarity, you were giving away your calm. Every time you chased understanding, you were shrinking your own space for truth. And then, one day, something shifts. You stop chasing the noise. You stop reacting to their silence. You stop handing over the emotional microphone. And in that stillness, your power starts whispering again. It says, hey, remember me? Power doesn't return in a roar. It comes back in small moments, the pause before the text you don't send, the breath you take instead of the argument, the peace that shows up where panic used to live. That's the shift. It's the moment you realize you can love someone without losing yourself. You can care without caretaking. You can be kind without collapsing. And here's what's incredible. When you start living that way, the entire dynamic changes. Because the avoidant, the distant, the one who always had the upper hand, they start to feel something new. Uncertainty. They can't read you anymore. Your calm feels foreign. Your silence feels powerful. And that unnerves them because control was always their comfort zone. They thrived when you were reactive. They felt safe when you were predictable, but now you've become something they didn't expect free. And freedom is the one thing control can't coexist with. Your calm energy becomes the new authority in the room. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to play games. You just sit in your peace and everything false begins to crumble. That's the psychological shift. When your energy changes, everything around you rearranges. And here's the secret. This shift isn't about making them notice you. It's about making you notice you. The way your shoulders sit differently, the way your breath moves slower, the way you speak softer but mean every word. That's the new you, the self that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. It's the self that simply is. Because the truth is, you never lost your power, you just loaned it out. You gave it away in the name of love, hoping it would be returned with care. But the moment you stop chasing, you stop the transaction. You ended the debt. Now you're whole again. Not because they came back, not because they apologized, but because you stopped needing them to. That's when you finally feel it. Peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's behavior. Confidence that doesn't need confirmation. Power that doesn't perform. It simply exists. This is what happens when you choose stillness over chaos, validation from within, and calm over control. You don't get louder, you get lighter. You don't get colder, you get clearer. You don't get harder, you get whole. That's the shift. That's the quiet, invisible moment where your life starts expanding. Again, not because they changed, but because you did. And here's where the story gets interesting. Because the second you stop chasing, they notice. They might not say it. They might not show it. But trust me, they feel it. Silence is powerful because it breaks the pattern. It flips the script. The rhythm they depended on, your texts, your check-ins, your explanations, suddenly stops. And for the first time, they feel the space where your energy used to live. That space used to be their comfort zone. They knew how to play it. Pull away, you pursue. Go quiet, you question. Act distant, you fix it. It was predictable, controllable, safe. But now there's nothing to control. And that emptiness they created suddenly becomes their mirror. It reflects their choices back at them. And that's what rattles them. They start to wonder, did I lose control? Did they stop caring? Did they move on? At first, they'll try to pretend it doesn't bother them. They'll distract themselves, stay busy, post, perform. But silence has a way of echoing in the quiet corners of the mind. It's not the words they miss, it's the energy. Your reassurance, your attention, your effort, the emotional safety you gave them without asking for anything in return. They start to feel it slipping. And it confuses them because they were never taught what to do when someone stops chasing but doesn't hate them. When someone walks away with peace instead of pain, your calm becomes their confusion. Your distance becomes their discomfort. Your silence becomes their self-confrontation. But this time, listen carefully, this moment isn't about them. It's about you. Because what's happening inside you now is even more powerful. You start realizing that you don't need their validation anymore, not because you've stopped loving, but because you've started living. You begin to see that the silence that once felt like rejection now feels like freedom. You look around and notice how quiet can actually feel holy. That's when you know you've crossed the line from reaction to evolution. And yes, sometimes they'll come back. They'll test the waters, send a message like, hey, have you been? They'll try to see if they still have access to the old you. But what they don't understand is that you're not there anymore. You've changed addresses. You've moved out of chaos and into peace. They'll expect the same dance, the same rhythm of pursuit and retreat. But this time, the music stopped because you're not performing anymore. You're not trying to prove your worth through their response. You're living in your boundary, breathing in your peace, grounded in your truth. And that's what makes you unchaseable. Not because you're cold, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized your worth doesn't live in their attention, it lives in your alignment. When they notice the shift, when they start to feel the loss, remember this. You didn't win because they regret it. You won because you healed from it. This is the moment the dynamic reverses. They start questioning what happened to the old you. And you, my friend, you're too busy being at peace to explain you've become the calm they can't find anywhere else. You've become the quiet that speaks louder than any argument. And that's the moment right there when they realize the truth. They never lost control of you. They lost access to your energy. And that difference, that's everything. Here's the truth about transformation. It doesn't last unless you practice it. You can't just understand stillness, self-validation, and detachment once and expect them to stick. These boundaries aren't thoughts, they're habits. And if you don't anchor them in daily action, your mind will go right back to its old programming. So let's make this real. Every morning, before you touch your phone, sit with yourself for 60 seconds. Just 60. That's your first act of stillness. No scrolling, no checking who texted, no looking for signs. Just breathe and remind yourself, my peace is my priority. You're retraining your nervous system to start the day in presence instead of panic. That's how you build emotional endurance. Stillness becomes your baseline, not your struggle. Then, as the day unfolds, you practice the second boundary, self-validation. Here's how. Keep a running note in your phone. Title it Proof I'm Enough. Every time you make a healthy choice, when you walk away from chaos, when you stay calm, when you choose peace, write it down, because your brain forgets your growth faster than it forgets pain. You've got to feed it evidence. At the end of the week, look at that list. Read it out loud. That's you rewiring self-trust. That's you telling your mind, I'm no longer waiting for someone to applaud me for choosing myself. And then comes the third practice, emotional detachment in action. Every time something triggers you, every time you want to respond, every time you feel that rush of, I need to fix this, stop, breathe, ask yourself one question. Is this mine to carry? 9 times out of 10, it's not. That thought, that tension, that guilt, it's not yours. That's emotional detachment in its purest form, responsibility without ownership of someone else's chaos. When you master that question, you stop internalizing other people's storms. You start becoming the weather calm, consistent, unbothered. And listen, I know some days you'll slip. You'll text back. You'll spiral. You'll crave old validation. It's okay. Progress isn't perfection, it's awareness. The fact that you even notice your old pattern means you're no longer living blind inside it. That's victory. Because healing doesn't show up as fireworks, it shows up as pause. It shows up as you catching yourself mid-reaction and saying, no, I'm not going back there. You can also ground these boundaries physically. Walk every day, move your body. Stillness isn't stagnation, it's stability. And when your body feels strong, your boundaries hold stronger, because the way you hold yourself physically becomes the way you hold yourself emotionally. And here's the most important practice of all. Talk to yourself kindly. Every single day, out loud if you have to, because you are the voice your mind hears most. If that voice sounds like judgment, you'll live in defense. But if that voice sounds like love, you'll live in power. Your internal tone becomes your external peace. That's how you lock it in. Stillness as a ritual, self-validation as a mindset, detachment as emotional hygiene. Every day you practice them, your energy grows quieter and stronger. Every day you choose peace over panic, you reinforce the truth. You don't need chaos to feel alive. You don't need validation to feel worthy. You don't need control to feel secure. You just need alignment. And that alignment begins when your boundaries stop being reactions and start being your identity. That's how you make peace permanent. Now, let me remind you of something, because it's important. The moment you stop chasing, you're not just letting go of someone else. You're letting go of the version of yourself who believed they needed someone to feel whole. This is bigger than them. This is about you stepping into your own life with full ownership. You're no longer waiting for someone else to make you feel seen or loved or worthy. You're already enough. And when you live from that place, when you hold these boundaries as part of who you are, stillness, self-validation, emotional detachment, you become unchaseable. Not because you've built walls, not because you've turned cold, but because you've finally learned the most powerful thing there is in relationships, how to stand in your own energy, unshaken, unmovable. You're not begging for connection anymore. You're letting connection flow to you because the people who can't meet your peace, they'll fall away. And the people who can, they'll be the ones who see you, not as a game to win, but as a partner to stand beside. Here's the thing, when you stop chasing, you stop being caught in the chaos. You stop being a pawn in someone else's emotional manipulation. And you stop feeling like you have to perform for love. Instead, you show up as you, not the person they want you to be, not the version you thought you had to be. You show up as the person who is already complete, already worthy, already enough. And that is when the shift happens. That is when you become unchaseable. It doesn't mean they'll never come back. It doesn't mean they'll suddenly change. What it means is that you'll never be the same again. You'll never go back to the person who chases or pleads or begs, because now you know You know your worth. You know your peace. You know that love doesn't mean losing yourself. It means standing in your own truth and letting the right people come in. And if they don't, well, then they're not the right people. You've created a life where you get to choose. And that, my friend, is the most powerful freedom there is. So I want you to sit with that today. You are unchaseable, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've learned how to choose yourself without apology. And that's the freedom that no one can take from you. End with a deep, empowering pause. That's your moment. That's your power. Now go live it. This is the moment of transformation. The moment you stop waiting, you start creating. You stop chasing, you start living. And in doing so, you become exactly who you were always meant to be.